Oh, well, that was off to a good start, wasn't it? So I wasn't even in the room when we kicked off. So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to actually be here with you all today. I'll just start with a very quick introduction of who I am. So my name is Kopelke. I have the privilege of looking after all the engineering and architecture teams at VMware. And we have quite a few hundred engineers and architects in the team based here in Australia and New Zealand. And we really focus on helping build, design innovative technologies to help both private, public and government organisations achieve whatever goals they're looking after, right? So through that, we actually get some quite interesting cases and lessons learnt that we do throughout the time there. And I really wanted to use the opportunity today at a forum like this and talk a little bit about some innovations in around smart cities and what we're seeing, some of the lessons that we've learnt from that, and what role we've sort of played in helping people achieve their goals in those areas so you can understand that, but more focusing on the outcome that the agencies were trying to achieve as well. So just to give that visibility overall. I'm also going to spend a little bit of time as I go through this, and I think we've got 15 odd minutes to go through with a bit of a closing, is to share, I think there's 3 examples I'm going to share today of global examples of cities that have done something really innovative, talk a little bit about the challenge that they had as they got there, and then sort of link back around how we addressed some of that challenge as well as we go through there. So hopefully it takes some knowledge away from all of you, a little bit of a value of lessons learned. It's always great to hear how someone else stuffed up before we go around and do it ourselves, right? So that's one of the key things that we do in our role, is help people with that sort of knowledge. A couple of things I want to just talk about at a high level when we talk about innovation in creating smart cities and evolving in that area. And in the last session that was just on before as well, I was watching most of it before I snuck out for a coffee, there was quite a bit of talking around about data and how do we actually leverage data, the concepts around data science and analysing it and all those sort of things around there as well. And the utilisation and the shared access to data and doing the right governance and protection about that was absolutely one of the common themes across all the cases that we work with. And I know I said I'm going to share 3 here today, but we've got, if I went through the use case examples that we've built over the last 12 months with cities, there was over 100 there. And these are the 3 that I thought was the most interesting anyway, that I wanted to talk about. So, but leveraging data and how to do that, and not just open data of government data, but the partnership between government agencies and private organisations that have information data that would help actually increase a service or capability to a particular city as well, and how to manage that interaction and connection as well. So leveraging data was really important. The second part that we found across that, a mobile-first attitude to everything. So how do we actually digitalise as much information as we possibly can? And it goes to the second point as well, targeted communications, is how do we actually mobilise as much as we can to push it out there so the citizen, whether it's the citizen themselves or the employee of the government agency, has the information they need in a mobile environment, right? And this isn't just a work from home concept. This is, people in the field, whether they're, someone working at a fire station or a police officer, wherever it happens to be. So that mobile first and then that targeted communication was actually key. The other thing there that we found is the most common thing is how do we, the old saying of doing more than less, and you probably hear it in government all the time, right? You're going to get less money, but we want you to do more with it, right? What's the number one way to do that? Is automate as much as we possibly can, right? So how do we actually take actions and processes and decisions that can be automated and automate those? And I promise during this presentation, I'm going to do something you've seen from no technology provider in the last year. I'm going to go through the rest of this presentation. I'm never going to use the word AI once, right? So even though it's a really important and it's sort of baked in, sort of every technology thing has something sprinkling machine learning or AI, right? And I'm sure it's done in the background of something that I talk about here, but I'm not going to go into it in any detail. So automation here is not about AI or any sort of, robot going out there and arresting someone in a convenience store for stealing a packet of chips. This is really just going to be focused on how do we take standard processes that we have or interactions that the public have with our services and automate as much as that as we possibly can. So there's sort of the 4 key areas that we found. And then what role did we have that as VMware as an organisation and where we sort of helped departments sort of get to that is one of the common things that we needed and we found out is that the way they need to access all this information, build applications, manage data, manage databases, sets of services, all those sort of things, all devices, is come to the realization is that there's no perimeter to anything that we do anymore. And then we actually have what we refer to as this multi-cloud environment, right? So what do I mean by that? So most organizations, whether they're government through to large enterprises or even small to medium-sized businesses, you sort of start on this end with you've got your data center, right? And government departments have many of those, and they're all around the place and replicated and all that sort of stuff. There's this shift to try to get some of that stuff, and I say some, out of the data center, because if it was 2 years ago, we'd all be saying, hey, cloud first, we're going to get all of this out of the data center in the next 12 months, and we're going to be like zero in the data center, right? Now, reality check, we're sort of like 60% in the data center and probably 40% in the cloud, and the balance may be somewhere in between that, right? So we have the data center. Then we refer to what we refer to as what I'd say private cloud, which is really just the data center, but remodeled and modernized, excuse the trip on words there, to actually look a little bit more like a cloud environment, but it's sitting in the infrastructure that you have today. So the data center, public cloud, then you move into your private cloud, then you move into your public cloud environments. So they're all the big hyperscalers we know. So Microsoft Azure, AWS, Google, Oracle Cloud, IBM Cloud Platform, there's a whole lot of them, right? But there's 3 or 4 major places. That you've got that. But there's other actually cloud concepts that's important in multi-cloud as well that we found cities and government agencies wanted to take advantage of. The next one is what we refer to as sovereign cloud, right? Because, and I'm not sure, I should have researched this before, I'm not sure what data requirements and compliance requirements there are for Department of Transport, for example, but there are a lot of government departments, both in Australia, New Zealand, and around the world, who have particular requirements around what data can be held in what cloud environment and a need for compliance and governance capabilities to have this concept of sovereign cloud. In other words, we either own the infrastructure or we understand the boundaries of where that infrastructure is, and it sits within the legislation requirements that we can control or participate in the country that we're delivering that service. So sovereign cloud becomes, so I'm up to like, what, 5 different cloud environments, right? And then we get to the next one, which is hugely important when it comes to smart cities, is what we call the cloud edge. Right? So this is taking small, sort of almost cloud-type infrastructures that's automated and treated and managed like a cloud infrastructure and stuck out somewhere, right? So this cloud edge could be a tiny little capability that's delivering a service out to a remote location. It could be something highly complex sitting at a hospital somewhere, but basically these concepts of these cloud edges, and I'll use some examples in this. So where we've worked closely with customers is the realization is they're going to build services and they're going to need and create applications across all these different cloud environments, right? They're going to have to access data that's potentially generated, created, and utilized across all those different cloud environments. And just to make it a little bit easier for government departments, we're going to layer on the top that, at the top level, our ministers are saying, hey, let's do more industry partnerships. Let's connect with all the private organizations out there and see how we can leverage data together and do all that smart stuff. So you take all the layers that you have, and then you layer another layer on top of it as well, and say, hey, this is really easy to go build apps and create utilization for all this, right? So it becomes really complex. So we're focused quite heavily on how do we build secure and resilient environments across these multi-cloud platforms. Now, as a technologist myself and my team I work with, when I step back in the role that we play in this and what's really important for us and for the agencies that we work with is that if you want to build and create innovative technologies and push them out there, one, obviously you need to understand your customers' needs and all those sort of things, and user acceptance testing, all that's great stuff. But if you want to get really good stuff, you actually really need good developers, right? You need to have, within your organization or the people you're a partner with, creative and innovative developers who are passionate about what they're doing, right? That's where we see the biggest success. People are generally passionate around building capabilities for citizens, right? Find them, but then you need to make their experience as simple and easy as possible, right? Because if you think if you're a technical developer person, you look at all these things as I talked about. Every one of these cloud platforms require a different capability and different way to deliver solutions and software and push it out there. The concepts are all the same, the code's all different, right? And what happens when you start doing things differently? Right? You start to get mistakes, you get security gaps, you get all these sort of things. So multi-cloud environments as a developer experience is extremely difficult, right? It was funny, I was talking to a large energy provider recently in their CTO, and the CTO had been on board sort of, I think 6 months, but he said his CIO before that was still there had said, we've got a cloud first strategy. We're all in on Azure, right? Everything's on Microsoft. Our whole cloud platform's on Azure. And this is a big energy provider, right? It's all there. And then he sort of smiled and he looked at me and said, on completely unrelated matter, he says, I've got 4 different development teams. I've got one for Microsoft Azure, I've got one for AWS, I've got one for Google, and I've got one for Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, right? Because the reality is, no matter what they tried, they couldn't build it all on there because there was different services, different data sets, and different locations they need to spread across that. So there's the challenge. Let's start talking through some great examples of what that challenges look like and how some of those challenges are addressed. The first one I'm going to talk about is Transport of London. Now, completely coincidental, and I'm not kidding you, I got out of the car here and realised I was wearing London bus socks, right? So this must have been, I sort of had to flip the slides away to make sure this one goes first, but that was not planned at all. So some really interesting things that the London Transport were actually doing in their environment as well is one, that they needed to have a multi-cloud strategy, right, as I was referring to before. Now, the reason behind this is their focus was on how do we actually reduce maintenance windows for our transport systems, right, for the tubes, for the trains, etc. And they actually realized that although they had a large amount of data sets and technology that allow them to, we know where, when, things break down, areas like that as well, what they actually realized is the information that they really needed that actually helped this was not just when and where things were going to happen, but what type of things happened, where were the things that we needed to fix that, whether that was people or actually stuff, like, I don't know what you fix a tube with, it's not tyres, whatever it is. But where were the actual hardware things that you need to fix that? Who has them, and how do we order them and get them to where we need and predict some of that movement as well, right? So they actually built a multi-cloud platform that actually a large amount of the data sets that they needed was sitting in a private cloud infrastructure that they had. And then they actually pushed a bunch of replicated data sets into a cloud that sat in across multiple cloud environments, so the application sat closer to the actual data. So data always, there's the concept of data gravity. Wherever the main data is where the application gravitates to, right? So the connections for it. So they could have that and access these third-party data sets to actually combine all that, analyze all that information using a bunch of data science capabilities and deliver back predictability. So they're actually trying to reach a point, and I call this sort of Amazoning their infrastructure, saying, can we actually move hardware and necessity tools and parts closer to locations before the incident happens, right? And the reason we say that, and we call that Amazonizing, if you didn't know, when you shop on Amazon, in America, the reason they can deliver you stuff same day in many capital cities is they actually predict what you're going to buy when you're shopping and hovering over, and quite often they actually ship the product to a closer data center before you've even bought the product. And they're around about 70% accurate when they do that, right? So they actually dramatically reduce their shipping costs and times because they do it at a cheaper an hour before you've even actually purchased the product, right? So the same sort of concept. I don't know whether they're going to quite get to that level, but the concept's great in theory as well. So they really need to do that, but they also wanted to actually make sure they could understand how crowds move around those environments as well. So they pushed out what we call a smart video infrastructure inside their across the tube infrastructure as well, to analyze all the data and the people movements and how traffic's flowed with people and coming in and out of environments. And especially when there was a tube blockage or something along those lines, how do we actually redirect flow? And actually found that it actually closed certain doors, actually moved people out of the certain tubes faster, believe it or not. There's some sort of water liquid flow theory that goes into all that sort of stuff as well. But they're able to design some of those things as well. So it's really, really creative. The other third thing that they put down there as well that they do, which actually has nothing to do with us and I don't know anything about, it's just really cool because I got to try it, is they actually use virtual reality to train their drivers on how to trade the trains. I sort of joked they actually should publish this on the Steam's game store, because I'm pretty sure my kids and everyone else would download it and go driving a tube around London, but it was really cool anyway, so I just wanted to share that one, completely irrelevant to what I was talking about. All right, so the next one, I've got a few minutes, so I just want to go for the last couple here because they're quite interesting in what they're delivering. So Singapore government also does a very interesting one as well, and they've got this smart platform of sensors that they're rolling around. Now, I'm always hesitant to use Singapore government as an example because it is probably some of the coolest stuff. I don't know how many of you spent much time in Singapore, but I probably get to spend 3 or 4 months a year in Singapore with my work quite often, and it is just an easy city. if you've ever driven around there or worked around there, right? Everything works, every car park's connected, you don't need different payments on different things, all that sort of stuff. But they do want to drive considerably down traffic utilisation, right, in Singapore. It's a small city, you know, environmental reasons, all these other great reasons that they're trying to do that. Now, I'm surprised anyone actually owns a car in Singapore, because when you buy a car, you actually have to buy a licence for the car, not a licence to drive. So the car I drive, which I paid probably 50 grand for here in Australia, is around about $215,000, right, to get that over in Singapore when you get your 10-year licence with you. I actually thought that alone is a pretty good way to get cars off the road, but unfortunately it's not, because people in Singapore must make a lot of money. So they've still got all these cars and all these issues. So if anyone's sort of seen their road infrastructure, they've actually got these sensors out, and you actually can put them on in your car as well, on your mobile phones, on your devices as well. Now, there's that balance of Big Brother's tracking me everywhere I go, do I want it or do I not? But if what I get delivered out of that gives me enough value, I'm happy to do it, then we will do it, right? And they're actually seeing a large percentage of people do this. By integrating these applications on their devices or on their GPS devices, it's actually not just giving them, hey, this is what we think the fastest route to the location that you're going to. And if you use things like Google Map, it'll take in current traffic and your predicted traffic and all those sort of stuff. But it actually will start doing things like efficiency around, if you're driving this particular type of car and you have to pause and stay still inside this location for this period of time, you're actually more energy efficient to drive this location. And it may take you 1 minute longer, right? Or 3 minutes longer. So it's doing all these really smart things to route people around where they go. So it's sort of nice to see the government do that. A little more concerned when Google Maps do it, because I'm pretty sure when I search something on Google, they're going to drive me past the store that I searched on, right, at some stage. I'm pretty sure that's going to start happening. But there was some really good stuff that they're doing around that. And once again, they had to create these capabilities to bring that, you know, a safe, secure platform to analyze all that data and bring it back into the data centers and protect that as we do that. The last one I'm going to talk about is the city of Las Vegas, just because it's a cool city, but they were actually doing some really interesting things. People behave badly in Las Vegas, if you've ever been there quite often, so they do have civil unrest and civil disturbances and all areas like that as well. But they wanted to build an infrastructure and capability to actually analyze through video behaviours and movements of people, but not just people, down to sites and situations. So they actually can analyse a building and actually heat detect before we see smoke of whether there's a potential fire about to happen, right? In major areas like restaurants and areas like that. Then they actually can do smoke detection, right? And all of that feeds back to get faster response by public services like fire, police, etc., to actually drive those capabilities and deliver that. They also have capabilities to identify civil unrest. Now in Las Vegas, that's actually quite difficult, right? Because you get a bunch of, you know, party people jumping up and down, hugging each other, running down the strip. Sort of looks like they may be wrestling. That's very different to someone else going to do, you know, something quite different, which civil unrest may be someone just pulling wallets out of the back of your pocket, right? Or things like that as well. So they're analysing and creating these systems to create that intelligence into those platforms. And once again, they need to do this in a hugely secure environment, but they've rolled that out in a multi-cloud environment where the actual cloud infrastructure that analyses all that video is sitting out on the edge near each of the cameras. So about 25 cameras connect to a mini cloud. That mini cloud does about 80% of the analysing of the data on that spot, and then only moves it back to the central data, public cloud and private clouds over the networks as it's needed, right? So the intelligent cloud is sitting out on the edge. In fact, we actually partnered with one of the major telco providers as they rolled out their 5G towers, and each of those 5G towers actually have a mini VMware cloud container platform sitting inside the tower that they actually can update the software at any time they want, so it's no proprietary hardware. So some very clever stuff going on there as well. So they're the three, I think, innovative examples and some of the challenges around having to manage the data, protect it, and multi-cloud infrastructure that comes when you're sharing all those data points as well. I do want to close now because I'm just hitting my time now. And a couple of important things for us at VMware. You know, we have an ESG strategy. It's really important to VMware. We're a large organisation, right? We've got 35,000 staff. We're in 47 countries around the world. We have massive data center infrastructures, as you could imagine. I was actually reading our internal VMware engineering team's documents recently. We create, build, deploy, and then destroy 1.5 million container environments every month. right? So that's the sort of development platforms they're on. So we do crazy energy. So actually having some sort of sustainability is really important to us, but not just us, but how we partner with people as well. So I just want to leave this with you, with anyone that you're talking with as well. Around about 98% of all government organisations around Australia, their data centre runs on VMware infrastructure, the virtualisation platform in the back. We've now built into every one of those platforms technology that you can just turn on that immediately tells you your energy consuming capabilities and sustainability of your data center platform, from the servers, the computes, to the storage, to the network utilization, right? Your CFOs love this stuff because they're currently doing this rubbish on, not meaning sustainability is rubbish, the reporting on Excel spreadsheets and things like that. So we can automate all those sort of things. So just something out there to think about when you're talking about is not just, what you're doing yourselves inside that, but how your technology partners that you're working with, like us, ask them every time you're working with them, what can you do to help us take a little step forward in sustainability of what we're doing? Because every one of those little steps makes a big difference as well. So that's all I wanted to talk about. Hopefully you found some of these lessons learned and examples interesting. We have, back at our stand, information on all these. Some of these we actually have reference architects that we can publicly share out as well with those agencies. So feel free to reach out and have a chat to all of us. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you very much.